Hello, I'm Dr. Scott Wadier.
And I'm Tommy Welling, and you're listening to the Fasting for Life podcast.
This podcast is about using fasting as a tool to regain your health, achieve ultimate wellness, and live the life you truly deserve.
Each episode is a short conversation on a single topic with immediate actionable steps. We cover everything from fat loss and health and wellness to the science of lifestyle design.
We started Fasting for Life because of how fasting has transformed our lives, and we hope to share the tools that we have learned along the way. Hey everyone, welcome to the Fasting for Life podcast. My name is Dr. Scott Wadier, and I'm here, as always, with my good friend and colleague, Tommy Welling. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Hey, Scott, how are you?
Fantastic, my friend. Excited for today's conversation. We have a really cool article we're going to go over with y'all. It is out of the Journal of Nutrients, came out in 2025 in February, so brand new research. Early time-restricted eating improves weight loss while preserving muscle, an 8-week trial in young women.
Nice.
Really, really cool article. Reaffirms some of the things that we see day in and day out inside of our challenges and our coaching, things that we've personally experienced. So we're going to walk through this with you, give you some immediate action steps that you can take and put into your fasting lifestyle starting today. So if this is your first time listening, welcome in. If you want to know more about Tommy, myself, our journeys, how fasting has transformed our lives, why we live this fasting lifestyle, how we make it work, head back to episode 0 and episode 1. Give it a listen. Give you more insight into who we are, why we do what we do week in and week out. And if you're a long-term listener, I want to give you a shout out as we always do. Just got an email that came in. Hey guys, found your podcast a month ago. Left you a 5-star review. I got a question.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Because those are indeed our favorite kind. Thankfully, we are grateful we have thousands of good reviews. So that tells us and the podcast gods and goddesses that we are bringing value to you, the listener, each week, week in and week out. So thank you so much for your continued support. Thank you for being on this fasting journey with us. Thank you for trusting us to guide you along this way as we are still figuring it out for the long term. So we are happy to have you in with us today. Tommy, we want to give a shout out to a listener that left us a review on YouTube, correct?
Actually, we have one from Spotify today. Yeah. And M. Dumford says, loving the podcast so far. Since started incorporating fasting and seeing results after just a few weeks. Mostly came here to say you guys need a land the plane merch if you don't already have it. So I love that idea, and we'll definitely take a look and see if we can come up with any good land the plane merch.
Show us what you got.
Cool. Yeah.
We are not we're not great at self-promotion in terms of merch, and we've had this request so many times.
Right.
I have a hard enough time getting dressed and not putting blues together every morning. My wife's like, you can't do the blue on blue. Like, go change. I'm like, oh, right. Okay. Thank you very much. So keep up the great work. Thanks for listening in. And we appreciate you. So let's get into this study. Early time-restricted eating improves weight loss while preserving muscle, an 8-week trial in young women. So here's the starting point that I want to begin with is this concern over losing weight and muscle loss, specifically lean muscle mass when it comes to losing weight, generally speaking, but then also there's this concern, if I'm fasting, how am I going to get in enough nutrients? Am I going to lose muscle? Am I going to, what that looks like from a standard operating calorie in, calorie out, calorie deficit, eat less, move more approach. But fasting is a simplifier. So we want to juxtapose those two scenarios and then talk about the really cool results with a, in our opinion, not ideal scenario in terms of protein recommendations and a couple other things that we noticed. And the results from the study are still astounding that this was done in a normal weight BMI category, and the early time restricted and the delayed time restricted eating windows were statistically significant when compared to the control group. So we're going to break that down in just a second, Tommy, but let's talk about big picture, the expectation when you lose weight, and what percentage of that is typically fat loss, and then your fat-free mass, which consists of your lean muscle tissue and other lean tissues in the body.
Yeah, so this is one of the initial concerns that I had jumping into fasting, for sure, because being on the eat less, move more train, diet roller coaster train that I had been on for so many years, and then also generally pairing that up with being a member of a gym. I grew up, working out using resistance training, but at a young age, those kind of got commingled together with trying to lose more fat by like lifting more weights and working out more and like kind of pulling those levers for like commingled reasons, if you will.
Yeah.
And so then going into fasting, it was always like a very big concern. And I had been restricting calories for years and years, but it was still a very big concern. Like, is this going to accelerate the muscle loss process? Because I'm very concerned about that. And so just understanding that with any fat loss, any substantial fat loss, there's going to be lean muscle atrophy. There's going to be some reduction there. And we've talked about some of the specifics of that, which when you really get granular with it, it's not as much as used to be reported in the research findings, because there are actual cellular changes where some of it is actually trapped water within muscle and within fat cells that kind of throws off the results and the percentages. But you can expect somewhere between 20 to 30% of your weight loss to be coming from fat-free mass, from lean muscle tissue, essentially. And if you're actually at a more normal weight, if you don't have a lot of fat to lose, then that number only goes up from there. So normal weight individuals in a lot of the research findings show 30 to 35% of their weight loss coming from lean mass. Okay. And so just understanding that there are levers that we're going to want to use to mitigate that and to control for as much of that as we can. We can get much better results than calorie in, calorie out, calorie restriction model using very intentional fast cycling. We can do that.
Yep.
But just knowing that there's not going to be a holy grail of retaining all muscle, all lean mass with substantial fat loss. It's just not going to happen. And the reason why we want to point that out is because a lot of times when fat loss starts to work, if you notice that there's some loss of strength or muscle, it can be a reason to take your foot off the gas. It can feel like, oh, maybe I'm doing this the wrong way. And so that's not the case. So we want to mitigate it, but we also want to know that that's a normal part of the process too, right?
100%. So big picture, and this is what we're going to juxtapose with this study, is that if you lose 10 pounds, standard weight loss, 10 pounds to about 2.5 pounds is going to be from muscle or other lean tissues. To your point, Tommy, if you are in the normal body weight category, you can see up to 35%. So that would be up to 3.5 pounds, right? So big picture, when we're looking at this, there are two distinct physiological processes that are taking place. Losing weight through fasting and nutritional choices, and then building lean muscle tissue or preserving lean muscle tissue by working out, right? One of the things that we hear about is, well, I don't do anything. I don't work out. That's why we recommend really simple things to get your body moving if you're on a weight loss or fat loss journey, right? If you have 100 pounds to lose, don't just run to the gym and start doing deadlifts, right? Right. We want to remove that barrier of entry. So we're going to make some general recommendations like walking with a weight vest, getting out of that calorie burn like you were mentioning earlier on your journey. I'm going to get on the elliptical and burn 3 or 4 more hundred calories, right? Those things are vastly inaccurate, and the equation is going to be stacked against you. So this is the problem with this weight loss, weight regain cycle. You lose 20, gain 20, lose 25, gain 28, lose 28, gain 30. And every time you do that, you're going to be in a worse body composition period, which is why if you've been calorie restricting, eating less, moving more, and been on that roller coaster for years, it can be really disheartening because it gets harder to do the more times you've done it, right? So
yeah, and with less lean mass, it's going to get harder as well, because that's going to determine your caloric burn rate.
Which means you need better food choices, more consistency, right? Which is where you and I were years ago in feeling the frustration of, after multiple cycles of doing that, trying to get this thing to work out. That's where insulin and blood sugar and the calorie outside of the equation come into play in terms of the decisions and the hormonal signals and all those things that you, in terms of hunger and satiety and sleep and stress, et cetera, et cetera. So the really cool thing about this study, I just want to review it from the top down, is that there were 3 groups done in the study. So this was done in 8-week trial in young women, and it was very strategically and simply done in terms of the recommendations for when to eat, protein recommendations, and the exercise that they were going to be done. They actually measured the circumference of an individual muscle via ultrasound in all of these groups. So it was really cool to see direct effects of the study intervention. So here's what it was. There was an ETRE group. So time restricted eating just means like a fasting window. So like a 24, you have a 4-hour window, right? Mm-hmm. So they used a 6-hour eating window. So ETRE, early time restricted eating, was 8 to 2, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Delayed time restricted eating, this was the second group, was 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. So they shifted it noon to early evening. And then the control group was 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. They were going to be looking at the main drivers of impacts of weight loss and muscle adaptation during resistance training. So what they found was they had, it's a small sample size, 18 to 26 years old, 24 healthy female university students that were doing no recent resistance training and had no major health issues.
Okay.
There was no calorie restriction, only the meal timing was manipulated.
Okay.
Minimum protein intake was set at 1.2 grams per kilogram per day, which is actually on the low end of 0.5, 0.6 grams per pound of ideal body weight. This was monitored via food logs. We actually recommend a little bit higher than that. And here's the exercise component. All groups did supervised knee push-up training. So 4 sets of 10 reps, so 40 push-ups, 3 times a week.
Okay.
There was high adherence to the eating window, so 86 to 90%, and training. They also tracked sleep to control for the confounding effects of sleep deprivation.
Smart, because that's definitely gonna affect both muscular growth
performance,
as well as fat loss.
100%.
Sure. You can completely stop the fat loss process if you're not getting enough sleep, and that can be a tricky one.
It really slows it down, speaking from personal experience.
Exactly.
So here's the results. The ETRE group, minus 2.61 kilograms. The DTRE group, so the 12 to 6 group, minus 1.44. So statistically significant in the early window, borderline statistically significant in the midday window, the 12 to 6. And in the control group, they lost 0.48.
0.48 kilograms. Under statistically significant.
About a pound.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's cool that the arrows would go in the way that we would expect at this point, where it would be more optimal to use the earlier eating window versus the later window, because we know with the cortisol response and also with our blood sugar and insulin response, insulin sensitivity that goes down throughout the day. That means the later our eating window is, the less effective we are at efficiently processing our food and our fuel that we bring in. So I would have expected this, but at the same time, when I first jumped into fasting, I was using a lot of OMADs, a lot of 1 meal a day, but sometimes those were very late OMADs, and they can work very well, especially like for a while, but they don't always work. And sometimes they can create a plateau situation that's like, I know the calories are restricted, but why isn't this working? Well, your body is responding differently at different times during the day. So I love the fact that this one was big enough. The sample size wasn't huge, but we had a long enough period of time to see how those results changed between those groups right there.
And the cool thing was, so speaking specifically to that, if you're newer to the podcast, we've actually changed our tune over the years to shifting towards this, especially for women, this early window. So rather than just simply the skip breakfast club, right? Fast from 12 to 8, right? 18-6 fasting window. That insulin sensitivity at night is much lower than it is during the day. So the same meal at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m., you're going to have a more pronounced blood sugar response because you have less insulin sensitivity at night than you do in the morning. So we've been talking about this in different episodes more recently over the last probably 12 to 18 months. We're shifting your eating window earlier in the day, fasting, right, more at the second half of the day rather than the first half of the day, has been shown to move the needle more when it comes to the scale and staying consistent with your weight loss efforts. So we've changed our tune on that a little bit because when we first came out with our initial resource, which is the 6 steps to how to put fasting into your day-to-day life, the Fast Start Guide, a lot of people pick dinner, and that works for a certain amount of time if you've got considerable weight to lose, but eventually you're going to hit that dreaded plateau.
Yeah, over 90% of us are gonna go with dinner
because it simplifies your day-to-day, family, eating after work, etc.
Yeah,
right. But this taps into that circadian biology concept. So when we're talking about the results in terms of weight loss, ETRE absolutely hands down 2.61 kilograms versus the middle of the day, 1.44 versus the control, which is 0.48 in terms of weight loss. But here's the cool thing. All groups, just by doing 40 push-ups 3 times a week, all groups increase...
Knee assisted too. Right.
I've been there after multiple shoulder injuries.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, it's a great place to be, but I highlight that because it's almost, it's surprising, especially if you've been in that gym mentality where no pain, no gain, and I'm going to need more to feel like I'm checking the box. Like I've definitely been there where if it felt like it, or it sounded like it was going to be too good to be true, or it wasn't going to be a high barrier of entry, then maybe what's the point? And then I don't feel as motivated to do it, which is the opposite of where we want to be, but also it completely goes against what the results were from this study, which is amazing.
Yeah, so all groups increase tricep thickness by 1.4 to 1.6 millimeters. No significant difference between the groups. All groups improved push-up reps, so they all improved similarly in terms of strength gains over the 8 weeks.
That's great.
And there were high adherence to protocols and no differences in sleep duration.
Awesome.
So personal experience coming from the old powerlifting mindset, right?
Yeah.
Like I need to go bench press a Buick and do deadlifts and do 25 sets per muscle, and I need hypertrophy, and I need to do cardio before, and old bodybuilding.
Better not miss that protein window, that anabolic
protein window,
right?
all of that stuff. I mean, at one point, 20-inch neck, 20-inch biceps, but the visceral fat in the belly, the poor sleep, the high stress, and if it fits into my calories and macros, as long as I'm making the math, if the math's mathing, then I should be okay.
And if you're stoking the fire 4, 5, 6 times a day, right?
Yeah.
All that stuff. Yeah. I've been there.
I was getting bigger, stronger, right? But not ultimately what I wanted, which was health, longevity, balanced hormones, and losing that visceral fat.
Yeah.
So
better health span.
Yeah. So here's the practical implications from this study. ETRE aligns better with that circadian biology, like enhancing the metabolic efficiency and weight loss. So stack the deck in your favor. Have the trump card. Now, the middle of the day window still offers benefit, but just slightly less pronounced. So you've got some flexibility there. Early time-restricted eating, nor delayed, so that morning and evening group, neither of those groups compromise muscle growth or endurance when combined with the resistance training and adequate protein. So this is something that we preach. Protein-paced meals when you're fast cycling. Make sure that you're prioritizing protein, building your plate first with protein, and then backfilling it in with all the other stuff.
And remember, this wasn't even a high barrier for protein requirements.
No, it was lower than what we recommend as the bottom.
Right. For let's say for a 150-pound individual, which was somewhere around the average for this group, they would have been getting somewhere around 80 grams of protein per day. And remember, there were no full burn days here. They were using an eating window every single day. So it's somewhere in the 70, 75 grams, maybe 80 grams somewhere around there. So it wasn't a huge amount. It could have been better.
That's easy. Yeah, I would recommend that it should be better.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Because we really like the 40% protein number, 40% fat, 20% carb if you're wanting to go low carb, more keto.
Yeah.
If you've got some blood sugar imbalances, some insulin resistance, weight loss resistance, then using that macro breakdown. If you are a macro calorie counter, the cool thing about this is that these eating windows, better weight loss, muscle preservation without explicit calorie restriction. So this makes it much more accessible and sustainable for the gen pop, for the mere mortals. I'm putting myself in that group.
Right. And yeah, the push-up performance here, I don't think that you've highlighted this. It basically doubled for all of the groups. The number of push-ups that every one of these females could do was double after this 8 weeks. So not only are they losing substantial amounts of fat, in a good, like, slow drip kind of way, and the earlier the eating window, the more they lost, but their push-up performance was going up the exact same amount, regardless of which group they were in, which is really cool to see, because they were using the same exercise protocols, but then to double that across 8 weeks, and these were an untrained individuals, so obviously we're gonna expect some substantial improvement here. But it's really cool that the fat loss effects didn't affect the actual muscular endurance effects.
Or the lean muscle tissue loss, right?
Exactly,
that we were initially concerned about, right? Actually showed the opposite. So a couple of key takeaways: early time restricted window, clear in this study and others that we've talked about, seems to move the needle more. It's superior for the weight loss category. Simple exercises. You don't need the full 45-minute circuit at the gym. Now you can do that. So some people are like, well, what about the rest of my body? All this was triceps, right? Okay, great. Yeah. Well, you can apply the same thought process to, add in 40
100%
air squats. Now you're getting legs. Add in 40 reps of abs. Now you're getting the core. Add in 40 reps of back extensions. Now you're getting the back and lower back and supporting that lower spine. So 40 reps of those 4 exercises, and you're doing some work. Full body work. Simply. Just like you're not, because this study didn't have any calorie restrictions. So this is simplifying the equation. This is simplifying the fasting lifestyle adaptation. This is simplifying the number of things you need to track and levers you have to pull and frustration that can come from that. Now, it was a small sample size. It was only in young women, but it's really cool if we go back to the beginning, where in more normal weight individuals, you would expect that lean muscle loss to be higher. And what this is showing is that it's not. So I have a anecdotal story of a friend who's lost over 100 pounds, and he's done it quickly. Right? So there's that other thing about, don't lose the weight too quick. We've had some recent episodes about get the weight off, because that is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. When we did our diabetes, the most recent study that we did on the diabetics study, where if you lose greater than 30% of your body weight, total body weight, you're going to have an 80 to 90% remission, partial or complete remission of diabetes. So if it works for remission or reversal, it definitely works for prevention. So he lost 100 pounds and, hasn't been doing any real resistance training. So and what he has been doing is prioritizing protein. He eats mostly kind of ketovore, carnivore. And he's been fasting using early windows, right? Not perfect over the course of the last year, but over the last 25 pounds that he's lost, shout out, by the way, you know who you are. Only 16% of that total 25 pounds, so less than that standard, research-backed threshold of 20 to 25% lean muscle loss, or lean tissue loss, I should say. He's at 16%.
Wow.
By fasting, fast cycling, and prioritizing protein. Now we're getting into the cool conversation of, now let's start working on, because he's got about 25 pounds left he wants to lose.
Okay.
So now let's talk about optimizing that body composition. Simple workouts, simple fasting windows, and prioritizing protein. It's like the trifecta of long-term sustainable success.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I could resonate with that kind of timeline as well, because I didn't add in the resistance training until after I had lost some substantial fat too. And when you start to do that, it can feel like you're kind of reigniting, a process that you used before. I almost felt like that was kind of therapeutic in un unwinding the eat less, move more, the like I can only lose fat if I'm also working out, just that
Yeah.
commingled set of objectives right there. I feel like that was important, for my mindset. I'm not sure if your friend would resonate with that or
Yeah.
not, but it's definitely, as you shift towards body composition like that, I'm sure he's still going to use some of the same, or probably a lot of the same tools that
Yep.
he's used in the past, but then start to adapt those into the body composition conversation, right?
And yeah, this is all about long-term sustainability, right? So it's like,
Mhm.
oh, what's the best workout schedule? Oh, what's the best meal plan? Oh, what's the best diet? Oh, what's the best financial strategy? Well, the one you're going to stick to, right? So if we can remove some of those layers of you got to do the work. So in an ideal situation, you'd be prioritizing protein, you'd be doing some fasting, um, and you would be working out right from the get-go. But for a lot of folks, that the consistency of doing all three of those, making big food changes, restricting your time of when you're eating, and starting a full workout regimen can be overwhelming. Like, let's
Yeah,
be
yeah,
real.
yeah.
It's
Trying to
busy.
change everything all at once.
Yeah, one of the biggest things that we see in coaching is that it's life's going to life, right?
Hmm.
Stress is going to happen, bad sleepless nights, loss of a loved one, caring for loved ones that are sick, travel, work, kids,
Willpower. It doesn't feel fun.
willpower,
Fatigue. Just like
conversations with the healthcare providers. Well, hey,
mm,
this lab, all of those things derail us over time. So if
yeah.
we can just hit lots of singles, right? Get lots of repetitions, lots of practice, and simplify that equation, then we're going to be setting ourselves up for what is that identity shift, or that transformation that takes place over time. Because there's
Love
no
that.
magic easy button. You got to do the work, you got to make the changes, but how do we remove that high level of activation energy, or that
Hmm.
requirement of having high levels of motivation and willpower for long periods of time? Well, willpower is not finite. It runs out, especially with high stress, poor sleep, and crappy food choices, right?
Yeah.
It makes
But
it that much harder.
even more likely to get you when you don't feel like you have confidence in the method that you're using, which would be like going back to the earlier part of the conversation where we talked about just utilizing some aspect of resistance training, that
Yep.
it doesn't have to be the no pain no gain
Yep.
kind of method. Even if you are used to that, just doing something like a
Yep.
simple protocol that was in this study would be very, very effective, and should check the box for you,
Yep.
mindset wise and physiology wise. And so to put a couple of action steps
Yep.
into what we're talking about here, I like the idea that a lot of us on our fasting journey, especially if you have weight to lose, sometimes you can feel like I just need longer fasts to get more
To
effectiveness.
move the needle.
Yeah, to move the needle, to get the scale to do something new. But that's not necessarily the case here. Because remember, when you have excess fat stores, you're going to be at a higher caloric burn rate than you will be, let's say, 20 pounds from now or 50 pounds from now. So right now in your fat loss journey, you have more room for error, that you're still able to see results. But a lot of times you're not seeing those results because you might be under consuming and over fasting, or over consuming and under fasting. So one of the easiest ways to kind of give yourself a little bit of a physiological reset is actually to expand your nutrition window just a little bit. If you've been used to an OMAD, especially if it was a late in the day OMAD, or you've been used to, trying to hit these longer fasts, but not necessarily really hitting them consistently, that can be frustrating, but it can also wreak some physiological havoc as well. So going back and like downshifting, if you will, to something more along the lines of the protocol used in this study, which may be a 16-8 or an 18-6 or a 20/4.
Even a 24, yeah.
Yeah, especially if you shift that a little bit earlier in the day than you're used to, or at least start it earlier in the day than you're used to, but then you have that expanded window where you may be used to like a 30-minute window or a 60-minute window if you were doing a lot of OMADs. And now you have a few hours, but they're a bit earlier. You can find yourself consuming more better food, but then having a better response to that food and actually being able to sleep better too, because you're protecting those later hours during the day, which means you get to have a better physiological response. Sometimes surprisingly, you can start to see the scale move just by making that one shift right there. And so I would encourage anybody, if you're listening to this, to take a look at what you've been doing recently and consider making a shift like that, because it could pour some new fuel on the fire, if you will.
So the bottom line is early time restricted eating, especially when paired with resistance training and sufficient protein, even though we like to see that protein a little bit higher than what was in the study.
Sure.
Cool thing is it's still got results. Mm-hmm. It's a powerful, practical approach for fasting and weight loss and muscle preservation.
Sure is.
That's it. That's the takeaway. So you guys know what to do. Pick one of the things that resonated with you. Put it into action today. If you're looking for more guidance, join a challenge, head to the show notes, grab one of our resources. There's the blueprint to fasting for fat loss. It gives you some more insights into some of the things that we alluded to today. If you're new to the podcast, that's a great place to start. Keep going. Stay consistent. Keep taking small actions. And in the end, you're going to see the results and get the results over the long term, which is what we want, and get you off that dieting weight loss roller coaster. So Tommy,
absolutely
appreciate the conversation as always, man. And we'll talk soon.
Thank you. Bye.
So, you've heard today's episode, and you may be wondering, where do I start? Head on over to thefastingforlife.com and sign up for our newsletter, where you'll receive fasting tips and strategies to maximize results and fit fasting into your day-to-day life.
While you're there, download your free Fast Start guide to get started today. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Fasting for Life.